You know, some stories from history are just so extreme they feel like they have to be fiction. Well, this is one of them. It's the story of a man who went from being sold in a slave market to becoming the most feared ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. We're going to dive into his absolutely shocking rise and his catastrophic fall, not just as a history lesson, but as a chilling look at what happens when a victim gets absolute power.
It really forces you to ask a pretty heavy question. How does a victim become a monster? How does someone who has experienced the absolute worst kind of subjugation turn around and become something even more terrifying? That's the psychological journey we're about to trace, and we're using the life of Malik Kafur as our map.
Okay, so our story kicks off with Kafur's journey from captivity. And honestly, it's an almost unbelievable climb, from the slave auction block to the highest ranks of military power in a massive, powerful empire. The speed of his rise is just staggering. In 1299, Kafur is captured, sold as a slave. But his sharp mind and apparently his charisma catch the eye of the Sultan himself, Alauddin Khalji. By the early 1300s, he's not just been freed, he's climbing the ladder in the administration. Then he proves he's a military genius, leading these incredibly brutal but very successful campaigns. So in just 16 years, this man who was once property becomes the second most powerful person in the entire Sultanate. He's indispensable to his master.
But you know, for Kafur, being number 2 wasn't enough. He wanted it all. What comes next is basically a masterclass in psychological manipulation, as he turns the aging Sultan into a puppet to seize total control of the empire.
To really get Kafur's strategy, you have to understand what was happening to the Sultan. In his prime, Sultan Alauddin was a force of nature, a confident conqueror, a brilliant innovator. But as he got older, he became a paranoid recluse. And this is where we see Kafur's dark genius. He didn't just stumble upon a paranoid old man to exploit. The historical sources suggest he actively created one, feeding the Sultan's paranoia for his own gain.
So how did he do it? It was a slow, methodical poisoning of the entire court. Whenever the Sultan feared a plot, Kafur would say, "You're right to be afraid." He then positioned himself as the only person the Sultan could trust. He controlled who saw the Sultan, what news he heard, and the most diabolical move of all, he turned Alauddin against his own kids. He accused the heir, Khazara Khan, of treason, and some chronicles claim Kafur had the prince flayed alive, a horrific act that sent a crystal-clear message: no one is safe from me.
So, after years of this careful planning, the Sultan finally dies. And this is the moment Kafur's ambition is just completely unleashed. For 35 days, the empire would tremble under his absolute rule. This wasn't chaos. It was a carefully planned reign of terror.
35. That's it. That's how many days his reign of terror lasted. It's really a shocking testament to the sheer intensity of his rule that, in just over a month, he could do so much damage and cement his legacy. The speed and the brutal efficiency were just terrifying.
How do you legitimize a coup like this? Well, when the Sultan died, Kafur didn't declare himself king. That would have been too obvious, too messy. Instead, in a move of pure cynical genius, he bypassed all the adult heirs and put the Sultan's 6-year-old son on the throne. This gave his power a thin veneer of legitimacy. See, he wasn't a usurper, he was simply the regent, ruling on behalf of a child, while he, of course, held all the real power.
With his little puppet king in place, Kafur wasted absolutely no time eliminating any and all rivals. The remaining royal princes, they were blinded. High-ranking officials from the old guard, executed. Public beheadings became a tool to keep everyone terrified. He purged the army of anyone who wasn't loyal to him personally, and he looted the treasury to fund his new power base. The goal was simple: get absolute control through absolute fear.
This quote from a chronicle written at the time, it really captures the atmosphere he created. This wasn't just a political takeover, it was a psychological one. The whole court, which had once been this vibrant center of culture, was transformed into a place of paranoia and terror. The fear was so thick, so pervasive, that it was described as a physical stench in the air.
But here's the thing about a regime that's built only on terror. It's incredibly unstable. It basically creates its own enemies. Fear can only keep people in line for so long before it boils over into desperate resistance. And Kafur's reign was about to come to a very, very sudden and violent end.
The very men who built the empire, we're talking the old guard nobles, the top military commanders, they realized they had to save it from Kafur. To unite against a ruler who had spies everywhere took incredible courage. They knew his purges would get to them eventually, so it was a race against time. Using their inside knowledge of the palace, they planned a quick, decisive strike for dawn, when the regent was least protected.
And just like that, it was over. On the 35th day of his rule, the conspirators stormed his private chambers. The death he got was just as brutal as the ones he had ordered for so many others. He was immediately beheaded. And what's really telling is the public reaction. There was no mourning. There was celebration, relief. The tyrant was finally dead.
But Kafur's death didn't just magically erase all the damage. In just 35 days, he inflicted wounds on the empire that would fester for generations. Let's actually look at the long-term fallout from his catastrophic rule.
This table here gives you a really stark, at-a-glance summary of the wreckage. Politically, he took a strong, stable state and left behind a decimated royal family and a court just poisoned by mistrust. Economically, he looted the massive treasuries, leaving the state basically broke. Culturally, the once vibrant court saw its scholars and artists flee in terror. And the military, the empire's backbone, was purged, divided, and weakened. All of that in just over a month.
And here is the truly tragic irony in this whole story. The new sultan, Mubarak Khan, the very prince who had been imprisoned by Kafur, was put on the throne. But it seems he learned all the wrong lessons from his time in a cell. Soon he started showing the exact same paranoia and cruelty as the man he replaced. Kafur was dead, but the cycle of violence he'd kicked off kept going, and it ultimately helped bring down the entire dynasty.
And that brings us right back to our opening question, but maybe with a bit of a twist. The story of Mali Kafur really makes you ask, does absolute power corrupt someone? Or does it just strip away all the rules and constraints, revealing the monster that was hiding there all along? It's a timeless question, for sure, and Kafur's 35 Days of Madness give us one of history's most chilling answers.